like to call to order the Tuesday,
This
February
conference will now be
21st
recorded.
meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask for the roll call, please, Phyllis.
Counselor Belts,
Here.
Counselor Carey,
Here.
Counselor Lopez,
Here.
Counselor McKeel,
Here.
Counselor Oberst,
Here.
Counselor Salinas Oliveros,
Here.
Mayor Coons.
I am present. And Councilor Salinas Oliveros, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, tonight we begin our meeting with our consent calendar. We have our basic agenda this evening. We have a couple of things on the business agenda. We do have a work session for which we will take public comment during the item number 1, a noise ordinance review, after we've had a chance to get our staff report and then our reports. No special executive sessions or urban renewal tonight. So we will start off with that consent calendar. We met on February 7th, and those minutes were in your packet. I will entertain any additions, corrections, or a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second. Councilor McKeel and Councilor Salinas Oliveros for the second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And that does bring us to our general public comments. This is time for citizens to comment on items that are not on the meeting agenda for this evening. And I see no one here in the room to make comment. Phyllis, did we have any public comments submitted or anyone online?
Mayor Coons, we did not have any submitted, and I do not see anyone online.
Perfect. We shall move to our business agenda. We have OLCC renewals. This is the big list this time. Looks like we do have a representative from the Monmouth Police Department to walk us through this. Good evening, Sergeant Strack. How are you?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. I'm good. Members of the council.
Good evening.
So what I have for you today is the liquor license renewals for all the businesses, excluding the ones we just recently did that are newer or that got greater privilege. So with that, what I did is I went through all the businesses that hold liquor licenses and checked our reporting system and looked at all of the police contacts services that we provided for each of the businesses. And thankfully, you know, there was only one business that I outlined here. Everyone else had very minimum contacts, kind of your run-of-the-mill, normal day-to-day things that we would potentially go to as far as being thefts and victims and stuff like that. The information that I did put in here was for Jack's Pub. So Jack's Pub did have several incidences that Monmouth Police Department did respond to in 2022. There were no reported violations in regards to the sale of alcohol or violations of OLCC rules or regulations. But what we did respond to was calls for emotionally disturbed persons, disturbances, trespass, and DUI. There were approximately 6 trespass calls for service and 3 DUIs identified as specifically coming from that establishment. It should be noted, though, when I went through the trespass issues, the business was actually the reporting party in all of those instances. So they do show that they are trying to be proactive and trying to mitigate issues with their business. Before we move on from that, do you guys have any questions regarding the businesses?
I just wanted to make sure I understand when you say the business
generated the trespass, does that mean there's somebody on site and they call you and say, this is somebody we don't want on site?
Yes. Generally speaking, it's someone that they try to 86 or get out of
Got it.
there and then they refuse to leave and then they call us.
Somebody that's being a little.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank
They
you.
don't want to stop having fun. Yes.
So I think I keep mentioning this, but I'm concerned that somebody who's leaving the bar has had too much to drink. And I think a responsible pub owner would shut off the alcohol before they have too much to drink. Is that something that we can, sorry, never do it right, but just ask, is that something we can say you need to shut them off sooner rather than when they're no longer capable of driving?
You know, that's dependent on the business, obviously. A lot of the times we do get calls that they have tried to cut someone off, and that's a couple of the trespasses. They tried to cut someone off because they felt like they've had too much, and or they've shown up intoxicated and they turn them away. And then we happen to be watching the business and watch them walk to their car, leave, and then we end up stopping them on a traffic stop. So I don't think it's necessarily as much I can't say over-serving because we have never been able to prove on any of these that they were over-serving them in particular. But we do get calls from the business in regards to people that are overly intoxicated.
Go ahead, Chris.
Point of information there, OLCC guidelines for their servers permits, and I myself have an OLCC servers permit, do teach servers to, and do rely on servers to stop service before someone, or to not serve someone who is visibly intoxicated. I believe those are the exact
That's right.
words. Lane, fact check me on that. I appreciate it. So, for your information, there are OLCC rules in place there.
Thank you.
And I think, as Sergeant Strack saying again, I had an OLCC servers permit, been through the process myself in the past, that their duty would be, if they determined that the server had overserved, then that is a report to OLCC, and OLCC does take action against the server and the establishment. So that's where you can kind of tell if you can tell that, oh yeah, I've been sitting there for 3 hours and that's the only place I've been to drink tonight, then that is an OLCC actionable item, and therefore saying he found that.
Okay, and I do appreciate, Sergeant, your explanation that a trespass is when, no, we're not serving you anymore and you need to leave. So thank you for that. I will try to remember it for next year.
No problem.
Any other questions about that? Yeah, go ahead.
My question doesn't relate to Jack's Pub, but rather the process in general. Is this an appropriate time? Thank you. So would noise complaints regarding these businesses or individuals on the premises result in something that would normally be reported here? I have to admit that there have been a number of noise complaints, and I was surprised not to see it noted here in this document.
So noise complaints don't generally get the checkbox for OLCC in our reporting system unless someone specifically responded there because of the noise being from alcohol-related activities. We've had businesses that have had noise complaints regarding music, but that does not come into the report in regards to OLCC liquor license renewals.
Gotcha. So so are there clear guidelines from OLCC, the types of incidents to report here, or how is that determined?
So the only thing that we're obligated to report on is things that are violations of OLCC regulations, the sale of alcohol and stuff like that. I
Gotcha.
put these in here for your guys's information so you understand, as far as calls for service goes, who is generating more calls than others.
Madam Mayor, if I can, yeah, that's correct. When it comes to the city's, the room that the city has to make a recommendation, let's say not to approve, OLCC is very prescriptive in terms of the particular circumstances or conditions on which the city can base its recommendation.
Gotcha.
And they're all outlined very specifically in administrative rule.
Gotcha. And that was what I was looking for, I think. Thank you very much. And thank you very much as well. I appreciate
Councilor Oberst?
So I've come to the conclusion that serving alcohol is not an exact science. And it looks to me like everybody is doing an excellent job, with one exception who's doing a very good job. And with that, I'd like to move that we forward these recommendations to renew all of the liquor licenses listed in the report to OLCC.
Thank you for the motion, Councilor Oberst, and the second, Councilor Salinas Oliveros. And quick reminder, no matter what we do, even if we no way, OLCC doesn't really take that into account. So we appreciate all your work, so we can feel better
Yeah.
about it, whether or not OLCC will
Thank you.
echo any.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Yep, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. We will move on to a resolution regarding our trolley stops, because once it gets here, it has to stop someplace.
Cling, cling, cling.
And with us this evening, standing in for Russ Cooper, we have Mark Landau from Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor Kuntz and members of City Council. So tonight, bringing to you the resolution for adopting the various no parking zones and bus stops. The cities of Monmouth and Independence are preparing to initiate the My Trolley service operating between the two cities. One component of providing the service is to designate the locations for passengers off and on boarding. There are 8 proposed bus or trolley stops, and currently there's 6 existing that we'll share with Chariot stop locations. The remaining 2 locations need no parking zones and bus stop established by resolution. So to enforce the new traffic control measures, council adopts the resolution. Included in the staff report, the resolution that establish no parking zones for the proposed trolley stop locations upon adoption of the attached resolution. Public Works will proceed with installation of the signs and the curb markings to inform motorists of these new traffic control measures. The financial implications, Public Works staff will install the signs and apply the curb markings at the initial cost of less than $250. Public Works will incur minimal ongoing expenses associated with the maintenance of yellow curb markings and signs. And then it's Resolution 1960. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
And about how many parking spots are we going to take out there?
It's going to be roughly about 2 spots each location. It's 70 feet each.
That's all it is you can get 70 feet, this gets 2. That seems like, I was concerned that it might be more than that. I'm glad to know that it's 2.
It's roughly 2
Right.
spots because we also put in a yellow zone in between some of the parking stalls to give the room for people to pull in and pull out.
Sure.
So Russ and I went out and measured these locations, and the location that's by the new city hall, that one there goes down into almost the radius of the bulb out right there. And it's at a location that used to have a bus stop added at one time.
And the Jackson one isn't our angled parking. It's
No, it's the parallel, and a portion of that is already yellow.
I just had, just out of curiosity, if by chance we needed more bus stops, would the city be able to add that at a later time? Okay, okay, so this isn't just only 8, okay,
This is just to get the 2
perfect.
created so we can go out and paint them and put the signs up, and then it would be enforceable.
Yeah, if you ever need more, you just adopt another resolution designating them.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you for this.
Is there I've been trying to remember what's there on Jackson Street. Is there a house there? So that somebody's parking in front of their house?
No, this is right next to the old science building.
Okay.
Just right off of Monmouth Avenue on the north side of the street.
Okay, I've been trying to and I just couldn't do it, so I thought I'd better ask.
A good portion of it, like I said, is already yellow.
Okay.
So it's just going to take about a spot and a half, somewhere in there.
Well, as my grandson says, easy peasy.
Exactly.
Initially, I had some concern about losing a couple of downtown parking spaces because that's always an issue and has been. But the more I sort of thought about it, we're supporting mass transit. You know, we're bringing people right to our front door at the city hall. There's a multi-family or whatever the term is now right across the street. And there are some businesses there that people could ride the trolley there and enjoy Sippery, Yeasty, Momiji, Crush, Dry-Town, any number of things. So what was initially a concern of mine ended up being a good idea.
Yeah.
If the trolley does its job, John, there will be enough fewer cars that we won't miss them. These parking spaces.
Yeah. Good luck with that. But
Right.
Yeah, we're working on conversion, John.
yeah.
Go ahead, Marty.
Mayor and Council, just to make a comment actually about the loss of parking, when we, at least for the Main Street, the Main and Warren stop that's proposed, that is on an ODOT highway. And so both Monmouth and Independence were required to seek an ODOT permit in order to establish the stops. We recently received that permit from ODOT last week. Woohoo.
Yay.
Yes.
Clank, clank, clank.
And one of the conditions of the permit that ODOT made to issue it was that we consult with those affected businesses about the loss of parking, which we did with the surrounding businesses. And they were, the sentiment was similar to what you described, Councilor Carey, which was, we're hoping the ridership and the trolley will help our business. We are, we're supportive of it being there. And so, so we did check in with those businesses as a condition of that permit.
I'm waiting for Counselor Belts here.
So I move to adopt Resolution 1960, a resolution providing for designation of no parking zones and bus stops.
I will second that.
Thank you.
You, Counselor Belts for the motion and Counselor McKeel for the second. And Phyllis will take a roll call on this one.
Counselor Belts,
Clang, 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 yes.
Counselor Carey,
Yes.
Counselor Oberst,
Yep.
Counselor Salinas Oliveros,
Aye.
Counselor McKeel,
I just have to offer my ding ding, yes.
Counselor Lopez.
Choo-choo. Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Those are,
Come there, come there.
I am so
had to
glad we
clarify
are
the
seeing
ding
we're
ding.
going to have fun with this, Charlie. All right, rolling along.
oh, now you get it, you get it.
Moving into our work session, and thank you, our staff, great staff, for those staff reports and our noise ordinance review. And again, this is a work session item. This is just to sort of get our comments and input. We're nowhere near making any final decisions. And we were going to allow public comment during this time on this item after we've had a chance to have some staff report and a little bit of discussion to inform sort of where we think we might be going with this. So if, I doubt that that's why Councilor Oberst's son is here. Daughter is here.
Nope, it's here.
I doubt your child came to make public comment. So we will go ahead and kind of catch an update on what our city manager and the police chief have been looking into sort of other code options for this to start our discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll do a very brief recap of places that you've already been, so I'm not going to belabor it. But last fall in September, we had a work session to talk about our current noise ordinance, Section 805 of Monmouth Code, and we were looking at the section of the code related to amplified noise because we, over the last couple of years, have experienced the word I'm using is conflict between events that have amplified noise and other events going on in the city. I think that through that work session discussion, what we identified was that there were a variety, the three things that we were really solving for and what you gave guidance about was that we had a definition about noise limits and how to measure violations of noise in the code that, while clear, might not be helping with the situations that we were experiencing. That there is a permit process in the current code to allow for noise that exceeds the limits in the code, but that permit process was not super clear. And so clarifying that would be helpful. And that in clarifying that permit process, determining how allowable noise would be regulated. So based on that whole discussion, Chief Haynes and I, and thank you to our city attorney, we had several discussions and looked at both the League of Oregon Cities model ordinance. We looked at other cities, examples in other cities of ways that our neighbors and other cities regulate noise, and took a look at our current code and said, what kind of language could we bring forward to address those three situations: resolve conflicts, clarify noise limits, and clarify the permit process. So what you see in your work session packet tonight, the agenda item and the draft ordinance you're looking at, was our best effort to, in essence, sort of surgically go into the existing code and figure out what we might change to be able to address those things. So rather than look at a complete and comprehensive rewrite of that section, or we decided to try to be sort of, just try to address the issues at hand. And so the draft ordinance that you're looking at makes what we think is a clearer definition of what an unreasonably loud or raucous noise is. If you'd like, I can step through the draft ordinance that you've got, but this is a change to the definition, how we would define unnecessary noise in section 80510. And then we also drafted we drafted language that, in addition, in the acts of violation section to violate the allowable noise limits, that included it included a provision that said that a public event sponsored by the city would not be subject to a permit or exempt from the noise limits. And that would be the kind of event like Music in the Park, which, while it is put on by the Monmouth Business Association, is sponsored by the city. So that would mean that events in the park would not necessarily be subject to needing a permit. And then third, we gave some thought in the draft that you're looking at to establish a permit process. And the way the permit process would work would be that if an entity, a business who wanted to have performances that would exceed the noise limits or exceed that loud and raucous noise standard, that they would apply for a permit, and left some latitude in that permit process to be able to define location, time of day, potentially decibel limits, or other ways. Actually, the permit is designed also to have a notice requirement. So the person who wants to have an event that's going to exceed the noise limitations would need to notify their neighbors and let people know that they're planning to have an event that was noisier than we would usually allow. So I'm making my staff report with the assumption that you've had a chance to take a look at this draft. That we're bringing you a draft ordinance because our goal is for you to have a discussion and give some feedback about the direction this is going, and to see if you think that it can address the situations that we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. I'll also mention that the chief and I have met with the business that was the business in question that was the subject of complaints last year. And I also have some other work to do in outreach to current businesses through the Monmouth Business Association and the Chamber to both let people know that we're considering noise ordinance changes and also to check in to find out if there are others who have feedback about it. So I still have a little more work to do in that regard, but we've begun some outreach to let businesses know we're looking at changes.
Councilor Shetterly.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Just to supplement Marty's comments, if you look on page 19, that's probably the best place to look because it's focused on the language of the code that we're dealing with here. The ordinance restates other parts of the section that really aren't pertinent to the discussion. Section 8.05.140, that language comes from the League of Oregon Cities Model Ordinance. Marty mentioned that in her comments, but that language comes from the League of Oregon Cities Model. At the bottom of page 19, section 11, is just a rewrite to modernize the language, basically. If you look on page 28 of the packet, you can see in section 11, we're eliminating references to phonographs, gramophones, Victrolas, and those kinds of things.
Better be careful,
So I can-
Lane.
I can go blast my Victrola in it.
Yes. If
All
you
right.
find one, you can blast one.
And that's
Um,
that steam engine that I'm assembling in the backyard.
Well, steam engine's probably covered under other sections.
Boiler.
That's an another boiler.
Yeah. And then 805 point, so really that's just a modernization of language that gets at what 11 is supposed to. And then we've broken 11 also, subsection 11 also addresses this permit process, but so obliquely that, as Marty said, no one really knows how you would do it. So that the permit process has been broken out to a new section 805.155 on page 20.
And I'd just like to add one other thing. Thank you, Mr. Shetterly, for that clarification. In section 11, the prior language, or I should say the existing code, has language that is it's the basis on which our police department would enforce a noise complaint, which is 1,000 feet from, I think it's 1,000 feet from
The source or
the
whatever.
source. And that distance has been removed in the draft language.
All right. Councilor Lopez and Councilor Salinas Oliveros.
I'm certain that I'll have a number of questions and comments throughout this process, but the first that comes to mind is concern over enforcement. Our current language, as you just stated, has a distance from the source and specifies that it's audible or not, which seems pretty clear, at least for me. But I understand that I'm not an expert in this area. Does the new language make enforcement of violations easier, more clear, more clean? How does this impact you and you and the force?
I think it does. I think, our goal is not to have to do a lot of enforcement, to be honest with you, but I think that it does make it clear in a number of ways. I think the hard part that we kind of struggled with is that sometimes the 1,000 feet, depending on it, I've had many conversations, but depending on which way the wind is blowing, you might be well over 1,000 feet, but you might not think that the noise is unreasonable, so it doesn't always apply. So removing that, I think, takes away some of that confusion. But I think what it does do is it talks about what is loud and raucous and unreasonable. And I think the permit process, furthermore, if we need to, for amplified events specifically, because that's kind of what's brought us here.
Yeah.
I think that it gives, it does a couple of things. It provides for, we don't have hopefully scheduling issues, with multiple things going on. There can be specific things as it relates to potentially decibel limits if we needed to. You can actually make hours of operation, when you could do that too. So I think it gives more direction. Hopefully that's not something that we have to do all the time, but it does give us that. And we haven't had that before. So that was part of at least the thought that goes into it. And I think it does provide more.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I still don't. It seems that we've become a little bit more specific in terms of, or in a number of areas, but we still leave that level of judgment there and use terms like unreasonable. Previously, at least according to the staff report here, it says that the sound is not audible of a distance more than 1,000 feet. So it doesn't seem to matter if the wind's blowing or not. If you can hear it 1,000 feet anywhere, it's too loud. That seems like a much more clearly defined, a clearly defined metric. Not saying that I'm advocating for the old system. I just want to make certain that whatever we replace it with is as clear as possible and as enforceable as possible. And while I recognize that the goal is not to enforce it, the reality is that we've been brought here because of two concurrent needs, right? We need as you noted, we absolutely need a system that works to be able to offer permits and to be able to make sure that there is a path when it's warranted, but also when it's not warranted, we need to be able to get people to knock it off and get businesses to knock it off, or whoever it is that's doing it. And we need an effective system in place there. And both of those, I think, are necessary for this to be, both those aspects are necessary for this to be a successful renewal of the ordinance.
If I can, the model league code does not have the distance measure in it. I think in part because it's inconsistent.
Yeah.
You can have noise within 1,000 feet that is manifestly disruptive and unreasonable.
Yeah.
And you may not want to tie enforcement's hands to that standard. And you may have noise that carries more than 1,000 feet that isn't disturbing.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is there is no perfect noise ordinance.
No, I know.
And what this one does is at least it fleshes out the elements of unreasonableness. And it is largely subjective, but it does at least give the law enforcement a basis for a conversation with a source who can say that they've gotten reports of complaints from neighbors or people, regardless of the distance, who are being tortured by this noise.
Yeah.
And so the distance is neither a permission nor a strict prohibition. It really gets more at the focus of is it unnecessarily disturbing to a reasonable person.
And I'm not married to the distance. In fact, I can see a lot of reasons why that wouldn't work, right? More concerning though is the unreasonably loud or raucous noise moving forward and how we would enforce that. It doesn't appear to me, although it's much more explicit, any easier to actually enforce. If we're having trouble enforcing the current ordinance, how will we what will the language here specifically do to allow us to enforce this one successfully?
Well, if I can.
Yeah. And
I'm fast forwarding to municipal court where somebody's been cited and now there is a trial. What the complainants would be in front of the court, describe the nature of the disturbance. My 2-year-old couldn't sleep. It was 10 o'clock at night. We couldn't hear ourselves in a conversation across the kitchen. That's the kind of testimony that a judge would hear. And the judge then would make ultimately the final determination of reasonableness.
Yeah.
You're just creating standards here, first for the police to make their best judgment as to whether to cite. And if they do, you're giving guidance to the court as to how to hang the facts on the ordinance and determine whether it is unreasonable. It's always going to be subjective.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it. But this is a much more explicit set of guides, both to the police and to ultimately the judge, in determining whether all of this subjective evidence amounts to an unreasonable, raucous, and disturbing noise.
Have we had any noise ordinances? And I'm not sure who to direct this to. Have we had any noise ordinance issues get as far as the municipal court here? In recent history, I don't need to go back to,
We haven't really in probably recent history, but I can say that we used to enforce it quite a bit. And really, I think that, we had a pretty strict, and they were both related, but alcohol and noise policy here. A lot of times they went hand in hand, and really it helped us enforce college parties, when we go to a party, let's say it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's a lot of bass and there's a lot of music and there's a lot of other things going on. It was pretty clear for us what we needed to do, but it was still subjective enough. But that was really what it was designed for. And that's what we've used it for. You know, this has been different now. We're talking about a business, and I think for us it was we were trying to figure out what is reasonable, you know, because you're talking the time of the year, you're talking the time of the day, and the fact that it is a business, and they're doing business things, and so that was difficult for us. We haven't had that before, and I think this, you know, what it does do currently, it even talks about it, you know, speaks specifically to loudspeaker or amplifier, you know, and kind of that amplified music. So it does give us some more, I guess, clarity on the subject. And then I think furthermore, you know, if we had to get to a permit process, I think we can even drill that down further. So
I think that's exactly what I needed to hear. I appreciate you. To that point, is there anything, and I've read this, but I didn't read it through in this light. Is there anything in this ordinance that specifies that it is citywide, or is it zone dependent, or citywide? Okay. And then the current one was citywide as well, right? Okay, great. I think I'll rest for the time being. Thank you.
Although I would add that the definition of loud or raucous noise includes the land use, nature, and zoning of the area. So it could be that through a permit process, I mean, the consideration that it's in a residential zone or it's in a mixed
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah, so that's a good point. That is a consideration. But I mean, but in terms of reasonableness or unreasonableness.
So an individual in a residential zone that was throwing a birthday party and wanted to have music would be able to potentially at least apply for a permit and have that considered and move through that process. Wonderful. Okay.
Councilor Salinas Olivero.
Yes, thank you.
Was there anything left?
Well,
Nice.
the permit process that you are speaking about, is that only if somebody wants to go past the business hours, or they think they're going to be louder than those, that is who has to complete a permit. It's not anybody that is throwing a party. It has to be outside of these parameters. Is that correct?
If someone who wanted to exceed the noise restrictions would be subject to the permit process.
Okay. Okay. Because I read in here about it's also trying to eliminate the conflicts if there's like another event happening. So, but I guess if one's not going to exceed and the other one is, then they don't both have to do the permit process. And it may not be a conflict depending on the time. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. The conflict that is addressed in 8.05155 is if you have two events that are both asking for a permit to be able to exceed the noise limits. The way this is written anyway, is kind of a first come, first serve. If one has already got its application in a permit, then within 750 feet, and that's a made up number, but then, you know, another one, we're not going to permit another one right next door as you have a battle of the bands going on. But if you've got one that's permitted and somebody wants to have a birthday party in their backyard at the same time, they don't need a permit if they think they can otherwise comply with the general limitations in the ordinance.
Okay. No, that's great. I have two more. Hold on.
I will wait.
Hold on.
I'm
Two
going
more.
to put that down.
Okay.
Councilor Bell.
Okay, so let's see. My second one was the permit process. You were going to, it's under section 3, 8.05.155, and it's talking about notifying the neighborhood or within 500 feet if there is going to be an event that's going to exceed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then there was all these suggestions of how you were going to notify them, whether it's a door hanger, flyer, what, and is that, and does the city accrue, like, do we pay for that type of notification, or does the business pay for
The
that?
applicant would pay, they'd have to bear the cost of noticing.
Okay, okay.
We can help with that in terms of addressing if it's a US mail notice. We have the ability to be able to help
Okay.
identify draw the circle around 500 feet. If that
Okay.
were, if that would be helpful.
Okay. No,
And if it
thank
helps,
you.
I should say that language then comes from the Bend ordinance.
Oh, okay, okay. No, that's
The inspiration for it.
That's the inspiration. Well, thank you. And then just lastly, thank you for clarifying on the enforcement piece. because that was one of my questions. I appreciate that you have a conversation first, because I'm assuming that eliminates having to come back a second, third, fourth time. So that's nice. And then the citation piece, because that was my next question, is after you've had a reasonable conversation and it's happened again, that it could be a citation, then it could go to court. So thank you for clarifying that. I just kind of wanted to know the steps for that. So thank you. Okay, next.
So I'm trying to understand about the conflict issue as well. If somebody's having an event in Main Street Park, let's say May 20th, and they're going to have amplified music. Now, from my perspective, I know that the local business doesn't typically have music that day. But let us say they decided to have music that day. Now that becomes, aren't they too, I mean, how does that work permitting wise? Because as a business, they don't have to get a permit every time they have a band, correct? They should, or do they?
If the business knows that they will exceed the noise limits, they are supposed to get a permit. Now,
Okay.
do all the
But if they're not planning on exceeding the noise limit, but they're still going to have music,
Right.
loud music.
Yeah. I don't know that, I think just the situation you're describing might be a conflict that we may not know enough to be able to avoid.
Okay.
But we will know who's using the park, and that who is, because they will have asked to reserve the park.
They will have gotten a
And we'll
permit.
know that they'll have amplified music. So that would allow us, and we're talking about the city recorder and I, to be able to identify those conflicts to the extent we're able in advance. So the
Okay.
first permit holder who comes in, and the city attorney said this earlier, the first permit holder who comes in would be basically have that date, and
Got it.
for, events that are within 750 feet of that, if we get another request for a permit, then we'd be in a situation to say, we've already issued a permit for that date and there's a conflict, and we wouldn't permit it for another.
Okay, that helps with the conflict question.
Then I
Thank
think
you.
theoretically they would know too, because they would have been noticed,
Yeah.
the first holder would have been noticed. You have to
Oh.
Oh, that's correct. They would have had, to-
500 feet.
even though they're, yeah, okay, thank you. That's
They might have
great.
come in an hour later and not had
Yeah.
time to get noticed. Right?
Got it. Nope, that's good to know.
Counselor Lopez, did you go ahead?
I do have some, but I believe that
Go
Councilor
ahead.
Gill has
Counselor
been.
McGill.
So the noise ordinance then is the 1.05.140 on page 19, number 1 and 2. Those are the rules of the noise.
If I can,
No, go ahead.
okay,
That's-
they set out the general standard and well, I should say, they define what is unnecessary. Then the actual noise ordinance to speak is 150. Well, no, I should say, because no, 140 stands on its own. You could cite somebody under section 140 just because they violated these standards, these factors. Then and this is common in noise ordinances, 150, which begins toward the bottom of 19, says, and these things are presumptively unreasonable. And so we're not just gonna rely on these general provisions of 140. We're gonna say that there are some specific circumstances that are just presumptively unreasonable. And that's what 150 does. If you look at further back in there, there's a long list of things, construction and all sorts of things that we're not getting into in this code. But we're saying in 150, these things are bad. We're just going to say that these are bad, and they presumptively violate 140. But you could have something that doesn't fall within the litany of 150 that still violates 140, just something we hadn't thought about.
So, and the reason you get a permit is because in a business then, is that you know that they're going to violate this. And so I don't know how this helps the neighbors around the business if they have a series of concerts that are too loud and go late at night, when a permit has been issued, that it's okay that they can do that.
My first answer to that would be that when we started this conversation, we reminded the council and actually the neighbors that the police enforce on a complaint basis. So if any of this is going to be happening, it relies on the neighbors raising their hand and saying this is too loud.
So even though there's a permit, the neighbors can still come in and say, hey, this is too loud.
Yes.
And the response to that cannot be legitimately said, well, I have a permit to be too loud.
It depends. The permit can establish limits on the volume, but another thing, remember, that's part of the reason you have neighborhood notice. So that if somebody is applying for these and now the neighbors say, wait, I got 10 of these things over 3 months that I'm supposed to comment on, that could be their comment. This is too much. 10 of these permitted events that are going to violate the noise standards, that's too much in my neighborhood. And that would give the city manager the authority to deny some of the permits and say, no, we're not going to give you 10, we'll give you 3.
So, but it could be on 8.05.155, number 2, it could be that for the summer, it's already a done deal. and
They'll have had the
so-
chance to comment on each one of those, though.
Well, except the permit can be issued for a series of concerts or events.
Right.
Single concert.
No,
Or- oh,
for
or-
a series of
Yeah, but
concerts.
then again, you would have dates, the person would know how many are coming at you.
And
And they would be able to comment then in response.
excuse me, right, sorry, tickle in the throat, not COVID. It's, it's not where you still do that. So the difficulty with that though is they only have 15 days to, I know, everybody, quick, mask up.
For the mask.
They only have 15 days to respond to that after or 15 or 30 days to respond to that after the request for the permit. And if the permit is over, say, June, July, and August for a series of concerts, then the permits have been issued and the neighbors can't complain like after 3 concerts to say, whoa, this is too loud.
So the first clause in the section 2 says, the application will be submitted to the city manager at least 45 days before the date of the concert or event. So making up an example, on June 1st, someone wants to begin a concert series. They would need to have the application in by April 15th. And that's where that noticing and that's far enough in advance so that the neighbors are notified. And hopefully if there's something unreasonable about that application, we would hear about it.
Yeah, and I don't think the problem is before, the problem is after. So using
After
your,
the third concert, even
Right.
though they knew there were going to be 8 concerts. after
And
the
they'll know
third
next
one.
year.
and they don't know. And well, I think that it needs to be maybe like a single concert and not do the series. Because if you have to apply by April 15th for the concert that will be on June 1st, and then, okay, June 1st, that was okay, but then June 15th was the second concert, that was really loud. July 1st was really loud, but now the whole summer has been granted through permit. If the neighbors complain, there is no recourse because the permits have been granted for the entire summer.
Well, in section 5, it says the city manager may waive or modify any of the timelines established in this section and may issue a permit notwithstanding. And I could imagine that practically what might happen is at first too loud concert, a complaint would come in and we'd begin a dialogue following that. Or, if it was a complaint or a series of complaints, and we would start a dialogue with the permit holder to say, so we issued you these permits, but we're receiving complaints. And so the conditions of your permit or the permit itself, we could talk to the source of the complaint and figure out how to mitigate that.
Okay, and I read number 5, but I did not read it as you can like retract a permit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, it's proactive.
All right.
Or that's in advance.
And I apologize. If I had understood the legal terms, I would have not had to bring up that question.
If you had understood the legal terms, you'd be a law school graduate.
That's true. Or I would be a
Exactly
city
why we're
manager
having-
and
I mean,
doing
we're
a whole
having a work
job.
Session because I think what you've heard us all say is I'm not sure that we know or have the perfect answer to the situation
we
that
don't.
we're facing.
Right.
We don't.
Yeah.
We're sure we don't.
Don't.
And having your feedback or
Great.
talk through practically how we would navigate this in service to improving this so that it's working
Mhm.
for us is what we're aiming for.
And number 5 is what I was looking for, that there's an opportunity to retract the permit. So is that what that wording is? I'm good.
Well,
Section 5 is really in advance of the permit, although waive or modify,
waiting.
Yeah, that's timelines.
modify.
We can look at that.
And
Yeah.
subsection 1 doesn't seem
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
I think one thing that I would add is that just because somebody has a permit does not mean that we still couldn't take enforcement action.
Yeah.
You know, if we went there just because they were given a permit to exceed that, but I mean, I think that there's still some enforcement options for us. If we go there and we're like, hey, you got a permit, but that doesn't mean that you can, blow the socks off everyone around here.
Doesn't
We
mean
can still go there and it's not even close to being reasonable. You still need to turn it down. And if they don't, a citation can still be issued. That could be an issue later in court, but I think that there's still some enforcement ability, even if somebody has a permit and they're being unreasonable.
I think you might want to put that in there because when you go to court and the judge goes, it doesn't say that in here.
Yeah, we'll want to be careful about that because the permit needs to mean something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't want to give them a permit and then say, well, that doesn't matter. We're going to cite you anyway. So, I mean, it's always a difficult balance. So we'd have to think about that.
Knocked you out. Councilman Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for putting up with my repeated questions. I bet you liked it a lot better when I was on the screen instead of attending.
No,
in person.
absolutely. Let him have you, Chris. Missed you.
But a couple points, and before I dive into my thoughts, it does strike me that building upon what Councillor McKeel had suggested, that we do need language regarding the revocation of permits due to cause or complaint, and even if it is implied here, that language would provide greater clarity to our townspeople. So. I think the goal is clarity as well. Let me see. So we have permits, right? And they have to be applied for at least 45 days in advance. This doesn't list a maximum, time frame there. And so if I'm a business holder, or if I'm a homeowner or what have you, and let's say that I'm outside of that 500 feet, but I'm somewhere around that 750 linear feet there, which I now know is approximately 10 parking spots in the city of Monmouth. I do pay attention, but that 750 linear feet, about 10 parking spots away. So I wasn't in that notification zone. Will the city maintain a publicly available calendar of permits given and the general area so that, if someone is beginning to plan an event, they'll be able to go and get that information? I don't anticipate we'll be flooded with them, but our downtown gets pretty busy during the summer, right?
We could create such a calendar.
Okay. I hate to add to work, but ideally that level of work would prevent additional work down there in the future. And then what about businesses that are outside of, going back to that, 10 parking spots on distance outside that 750 linear feet, or about that distance? They're outside of the notification area, but let's say it's an event that would be impacted by loud music, loud noise from another event down the road. Would they need to get a permit to prevent another event from having permits? And I'll give you an example, right? So we have Apple Box Theater in the university square there. That is well over 750 feet from, let's say I'm going to go and throw a concert in the old Oddfellows building. I know it's occupied right now, but we'll just use it as an example. That noise can travel beyond that, and it would impact that other event had it traveled there. What process do we have to make sure that one event that would be compromised by noise isn't being compromised by that other noisy event, right? I got a little lost there.
I think I understand the question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it. I think there are two parts to that question. One is that the permit is not preventative. The only permit process that we've established here is about the entity who wants to exceed the noise limitation.
Gotcha.
We're going to rely on so how do I say this? We're going to rely on those entities, the Apple Box Theater, Shakespeare, present, or
Holy Shakespeare.
thanks. Those performances, if they're not going to be exceeding the noise limitations, they're not obliged to get a permit, and you're going to be relying on me basically as the permit issuer to know that, you know, business A has come in and asked for permits on these dates in July, and that entity B is going to be having a performance that is maybe not much farther away, but it's farther away, and design a permit that would hopefully avoid the conflict between those two events by creating restrictions or conditions on the permit that's issued for the noise making business.
I like it. I appreciate that.
I'm not
very
sure I like it,
No.
but I mean, we may not have perfect information to be able to.
Well, I like it better than what we've got now. So back to the time frame there. 45 days is the minimum. Let's say,
Like they don't ask for the next 2 years.
So let's say I don't celebrate my birthday. I celebrate my unbirthday, and I want to have a concert every weekend that it's not my birthday. For in the summer, 2 years from now, when I turn 41. You know, should we craft a maximum time limit so that we're not scheduling out into the far distant future?
You can't apply prior to January 1 of the year in question, for example.
But what if I'm scheduling a big fat Tuesday event?
Right, yeah. We can figure
I'll
something.
get away from that.
12
All right.
months, 12-month rolling.
Thank you. I rest.
Yeah.
I'm putting my pencil down.
And the pencil red.
I had one quick one, and that is your point, Marty, about you issuing the permit. Is city manager designee a valid thing to put in?
That, sometimes you see that in the ordinances. In fact, in chapter 1 of the code, there's a section that says city manager includes city manager's designee.
Okay.
And that applies throughout the code. So you
Okay.
just don't have to keep saying that over and over
Okay.
again.
Thank you. If she's out, then somebody's
Right.
applying. We got to have somebody. Okay. Thank you, Councilor Oberst.
So I have a quick follow-up on Chris's line, and then I'll hand it off. Marty, if you know about an event that is going to be sensitive to loud noise, and that event is not subject to getting a permit, can you deny a permit for a loud noise event based on that knowledge? And if not, can we put that in the ordinance? The city manager has the discretion to effectively protect noise-sensitive events from noisy events. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I don't know that I would put protect in there.
Because otherwise,
the right
that
thing.
750 feet distance
Avoid the conflict.
leaves the university stage subject to permits for
In the
our
event of a known
current
conflict.
problem.
Understood.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's my big concern about that. So I'll
I'll
hand off.
be looking at the city
Yeah.
attorney
Yeah.
to confirm this, but I believe that the permit process would allow for conditions to be placed on the noise-making event. And so the answer to your first question is yes, I could issue a permit that says, well, we know of other events that are going on that might conflict on that date. So permit applicant, you are restricted to either this time or this date or this decibel level. We
Yeah.
could say that.
Yeah,
there
decibel
are
level works.
certain
No
amount of-
amplification,
Sorry,
no amplification.
potentially.
Whatever
I,
the-
I guess.
But
we could
again,
ask.
yeah, she certainly could. She could put all those things on there. Or as long as this other event is going to be happening, they have to keep the level down to this level and you can go higher. But do keep in mind, this code isn't about protecting, it isn't about protecting people's rights to hold events. That's a whole different approach to this. And I don't think the city wants to get into arbitering between event sponsors. But to the extent, and if you look at the three necessary to protect the health, welfare, and say your health and welfare and safety, that kind of covers the waterfront. So if she's aware that there's a stage production going on outside, and on top of that, we have an application for a Def Leppard concert, down at the Oddfellows building, that would be a reasonable consideration. That really is going to have an impact on the welfare of the community if we have that right on top of a kid's performance at the park or something like that.
Yeah.
So she can condition that permit.
That feels. a
Def Leppard
little-
will just have to do an acoustic set.
Right. No,
Buy those tickets.
that's kind of what I'm after, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't completely, salve my concerns, but that's better.
Probably won't.
Sorry, Mark Landau left to not hear what all is being scheduled for the audience. Counselor Carey and then Counselor McKee.
We're putting a lot of faith in this permit system that's undefined at the moment. And if someone were to be crafty about it, Crush, the owners of Crush, on January 1, if that's the date,
Whatever, yeah.
could reserve every Friday and Saturday night from here until October 1st.
Right.
Because they are going to have an event, but thereby closing out anyone within 750 feet.
Right.
And the question then comes, what if they're just using those dates to shut the opponent down,
Right.
to deny Dry Town because there's already one there and we're in that zone. And then they have an event like 3 times. But they're always planning to have them next time. And I've got a permit for that, which I expect to be unreasonably loud and raucous.
Yeah.
So that wipes out that opportunity.
Right.
And to your point, Chief, they've got a permit. They said, we're going to be loud and we're going to be raucous and it's going to be unreasonably so. And so when you show up and say, man, you guys are what? We're unreasonably loud and raucous? And you say, yeah. And he says, exactly. That's why we've got our permit. I think there's an issue. I think you're going to have a difficulty in defending that. Now,
Well, if I can, I think
Yes.
the only answer to that is to take out that preemption language altogether then and just sort of let the law of the jungle prevail. Because yeah, you're right. If somebody wants to use this to their advantage to lock up every night in the summer, actually, I'm making a middle note. The fee ought to be on a per event basis and not just a per application basis.
Thank you.
That would discourage someone from just buying all the Fridays in the summer. But yeah, John, I think it can be manipulated.
And to give the city man, if we're going to stick with this as it is, to give the city manager some parameters, to me, hours of operation are a big deal. That matters. The days of the week matter. If you're on a Friday night at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, okay. Neighbors, you're going to have to deal with that if you live where you live. And the zone that you're in. Now, it's one thing to be where I live, a block from Gentlewoods Park, and we've got a, unreasonably loud and raucous noise permit going on down there in the shelter in a residential area. And we're talking about this being citywide, as opposed to Main Street Park, which is largely commercial, and we're within that. There's some residential within that, of course. Yeah. And John, to your point about 750 feet, that's got nothing to do with it. That just says who can't have an event.
Yeah.
There's no barrier on that. So to me, we'd be better off if we had some sort of sense of too much noise, with decibels, and you're right. If the wind is blowing from the south, it's one thing, north another. I get that, but that's not uncommon. And it gives a parameter against which to, maybe say we're going to be loud and raucous, but it will not exceed, 80 decibels, whatever the measure is.
Measured downwind.
Yeah, well,
In there.
but you're going to have to deal with that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. No.
And, you know, and I understand what we're doing with this, but, you know, there's a lot in here that, and there's a couple gender things that should be cleaned up. You know, I mean, just even if we don't get into the substance, you know, there's a reference to the city manager being a he.
Where?
Yeah.
What?
It's in there.
Hey,
Is it in the new language or is it in the old code language?
What's in the language that I printed off on the proposed ordinance, I believe.
Page,
Um,
I'll bet that is in the old language.
Oh, he's looking at the actual new ordinance.
Yeah, which incorporates all the old language. Because we're restating section 150.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Okay, well, in fact, if you want to,
And we
could
are,
go
by
back
the
through
way-
150 and degenderize it.
Yeah, that's an easy.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah,
That's
we-
not new language. If you're looking, if there's a he in there, that's not new language.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Then I had the old, because I was.
Or it's both.
We are protecting newsboys.
Yeah, I saw that calling out
We
the paper.
love it.
we
I like
need to
that.
know
That
that.
is
And the,
But not news girls.
and the, right, the shade tree mechanic who, you know, runs his bear hammer until 10 o'clock at night. And, you know, the guy's running the jackhammer on the destruction of a building,
That's
demolition of
horrible.
a building. And we're doing nothing about my pet peeve, and that's the Jake breaks on 99. But that's outside the scope of this.
Well, I don't know. They're loud, they're raucous. They're
Well,
gonna drive through town every day.
Oh.
Yeah,
they have to get a permit.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah.
You just-
only one truck per day.
What is
Permit
it?
only applies under section 11.
Then my neighbor needs to get a permit for his car.
well, no, there's no permit for that.
Counselor-
That's just a violation.
Counselor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And my apologies. I told you that my pencil would rest, but all this loud and raucous discussion woke it up. The item 5 on page 17. Is it item 5? I lost it here just now. There's language about, oh, it might not be item 5. I'm sorry. No, it was series. See, I was so excited I lost it. It's
Oh.
section 2, item on page 16.
Mhm.
A permit may be issued under this section for a single concert event or a series of concert events. The way that I read that is that I could, under a single permit, single fee, apply for a series of concert events every day on my birthday, every day that's not my birthday in 2024. So, you know, I think that to Lane's point that we do need to limit the permits to a single event basis and not apply them to a series.
Well, I was going to say the fee would be on a single event basis.
He said that.
Oh, well, and then later it does say that it says that there's a fee for permit authorized under the section. So if the fee is per permit and the permit is for a series, then,
He's saying he needs to
oh,
remove
okay.
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you said that it was, not that it should be.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes, Counselor McKeel.
So can we make it per concert?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't get a series.
Right.
can
You can,
only
you,
get
you can
one.
apply for them together, but you have to pay for each one.
Well,
Well,
Or-
how about a 3-night event then? So they would have to pay for each
No,
night,
well, and
one
the,
I thought I
event,
heard
3 nights versus one event, 3
Hmm.
weeks, once a week, 3 weeks. A Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday versus a Friday, 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 Friday.
Right.
We need to discuss.
Oh,
I'd
Well,
be
and then-
game to say that stuff within a week can be a series that's approvable with one permit if you've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But when you start spreading it out over more time, maybe we need to break that
That's what
down.
I-
I don't know if there's a way to do that gracefully, Lane, but
I can
thought.
figure something.
Oh, yes,
I've
you
got faith.
can.
if you
Thank
can,
you.
yeah, because I was thinking if you do one permit per event, then if somebody is too loud, then you're not revoking the permit that's in order or that's active. You can revoke future permits.
But do remember, they are getting a permit to be too loud. And that's the point of the permit.
Well, and so with that then, as Counselor Lopez made the point, I did the math. If you take 500 feet divided by 70, see, sometimes I panic with my math, that would be like 10 parking spaces. So well, I'm trying to think of what.
Yeah,
500
that
feet
includes
looks
the
like,
yellow
right?
paint and the extra space.
Right. So,
Mm.
but if we look
According to Mark
at,
Landau.
so the reason we are trying to deal with this right now is because the noise was too loud beyond 500 feet into neighborhoods from downtown. So when we have only a 500 feet range in looking for the neighbors to approve whether or not these permits should be granted, you're actually not including in that the people who have complained to begin with, which is why we're here. So it's like you need to extend that out like, well, all right, hold on, but you need to extend it out like 2,000 feet because it's the people out 2,000 feet who have been complaining about the loud noise in downtown.
And some close up were complaining as well. So that's our point is the sound carries differently. And I think finding a reasonable notification area doesn't, I mean, that at least
Yeah.
lets those very local people.
I think 500 is,
And our issue being if people outside of that area, especially if they're 2,000 feet away are complaining, then we know it's way over loud and raucous and it's a violation of all the things in the first section. Even if they have a
Yeah,
permit
that's right, yeah.
to violate all the things in the first section, it's causing unreasonable by distance. So I think the point about distance is hard, and this distance just being addressing notification
Mhm.
and direct conflict rather than where the sound is, I think is a better way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I still think that we get to, I mean, a nuisance is in the eye of the beholder. And
Or the ear.
and we've got some language, which is prima facie nuisance, I suppose. But somebody can complain about everything. And somebody, and I don't care whether they've been notified or not, but somebody can complain, and for them to be able to shut down what we're doing in a business and to do these one at a time would be very difficult for an outfit to have contracts
Yeah.
for people that are going, I need you, Carol and the Dreamers, I need you on August 15th.
Yeah.
I can't be sure that we've got a contract yet because, if we're too loud or a permit, so it's going to be contingent upon somebody not complaining 4 blocks away at 7:00 in the evening.
Well,
If I can on that, that Isaiah and his team are going to be your first to determine whether this is a reasonable complaint. And they may have to say, I'm sorry, they have a permit. Granted, it's bothering you, but we think that this is within the scope of the permit they've been authorized. It's all going to be subjective, but they'll have to make that first call on whether this person is complaining reasonably. And again, that's, I don't know how else to get, there's no way around that.
and after the.
Well, you
third-
could make it easier, but you could make it easier by saying, and furthermore, it's before 9:00 at night on a Friday or 10:00 at night.
Those are being-
Yeah,
Well,
that
maybe.
that's, and I'll say too, that's why I honestly, and we'll do whatever you want. I favor the more general language because every permit is going to come in under different circumstances. 9:00 at night may mean one thing in April and something different in August. I don't know. I would hesitate to put too much detail in the code, but rather trust your, and of course, we can run this out and run it for a summer and see how it works.
Yeah.
But trust your city manager to sort of fashion each permit based on the circumstances of the event. I'd be more comfortable, honestly, John, than trying to build the factors into the code.
Well, there's a lot of factors that you can't build in, but I'm just talking that just some general parameters would be.
But if you look at factors on page 19, in fact, proximity to sound sleeping facilities, that's sort of the Gentlewoods Park. Land use is a consideration already. So these things would go into the city manager's considerations in terms of whether or not this is within the bounds of sort of, it's too loud for the code, but we're still going to give you a permit to do it. She would still be taking all those things into consideration.
Well, it happens that Marty's a real rocker from way back. But if we had somebody, somebody different than that.
Well, you can put me in here, unreasonable rock is according to Carol, then that'll.
Can I just ask a quick question? So John would like to see decibel levels you mentioned. You mentioned more specific distance.
Well, no, but I'm okay with the distance
Okay.
because, but I do think time of day, days of the week, and some reference to zones.
I can add that to 3 on page 20.
Yeah, so those are in there as
And
factors. Would
I'm
anyone
sorry,
like
one
to
more
see-
clarifying
how,
question.
how many people would like to see something super specific about those items?
Probably not super specific. I think what John mentioned, we could maybe see what Lane can do. I don't know if we
Yeah.
want to go super specific.
And I'm sorry to be doing all the talking here, but this is, this is
No,
fun. This is
great.
interesting. In sub 3, what we've got is including but not limited to allow decibel level. That I threw in because you don't see decibels anywhere else in the code. So I wanted to be specific that Marty could invoke a decibel limit if she wants to. But we could go on and say time of day, the day of the week,
Yeah,
the zone. And all you're really doing is incorporating the factors from page 19 into those things. And you're saying that she can take those things, including those, but not limited to those things.
Sure.
That provides a
That-
bit of a
Okay, yeah,
parameter.
that works.
I like that. Yeah,
Okay,
that's good.
thank you. Go ahead. And then you.
So I told Marty before this, I was going to try to sit and keep my powder dry and hear what all you all had to say first. And I've heard a lot of really good stuff. You all know that I am maybe a little closer to this because my spouse is retired from the theater dance department at Western. And so I hear directly about the issues that have gone on over there the last 2 summers, summer of 22, summer of 21. Summer of 21, the worst night during performance was an amplified acoustic act at Dry Town at the wind, probably, I don't know this, but probably from the incorrect direction to carry the sound right to the line one stage. And it was a real problem. Part of what came out of that summer was, can we have a discussion? And the answer from the downtown business was, yeah, sure, send me your dates. So the dates were sent and it was crickets. And so I see that behavior and I say, we get to last year and with the dates known, we have scheduled a Journey tribute band up against a performance at the line one stage. We had the kids in Applebox Theater, they don't have the funds to afford microphones and so on. They're scheduled for, hang on. Of course it went away.
Okay, John, wait.
It's the first weekend in July. They're scheduled for July 6, 7, 8. And then we have the university got a grant to bring in a performance 3 nights of the complete works of Shakespeare abridged in Spanish. And that will be the last weekend in July, 27, 8, 9. And then the first 2 weekends in August will be Macbeth. And it would be nice to think that everything we've got will handle the interference with the noise. Probably the non-children's performances at Western will be amplified, but not much. There'll be voice amplification and music, before and after, maybe as part of the performance. Do they require a permit for that? I don't know. If they do, but they're outside the 750 foot margin, we're right back where we started again with the potential for some interference. So I want to put all those things out there, kind of what has gone on in the past, and just make sure everybody is comfortable that what we're doing has got the potential to address all that.
What do you have a proposal? Because we do know that history. We know
Right.
that's one.
I just want to make sure that, look, part of my proposal would be, rather than saying raucous outdoor, raucous performances, say outdoor performances require a permit. Period. Outdoor performances require a permit. And that could be, and you could expand that to include recorded music, I suppose, you know? And I would look at 1,000 feet instead of 750 for conflicting.
Yeah, and this isn't just performances, remember? It could be someone's.
That's what I just
My
said, was
birthday party.
recorded music would be an issue as well. And I don't know how you get that in, but, so there's no good solution to this. The best solution is people behaving reasonably.
Exactly, that's right.
And we have had an issue with that.
So you don't have any other specific ideas for language that you can offer these? three?
I, other than saying that we need to have a really stringent and broad permit process because reasonableness has failed us, I really don't. I do have a couple other things though, Cease. Lane, you indicated that if something went to court, a neighbor might come in and testify. Does the neighbor have to come in and testify? Because we've had issues with people not even being willing to complain because of the fear of ramifications.
Yeah.
Okay, there were businesses downtown that were not happy about what was going on, and they would not make a formal complaint. If there is a high level of noise and Isaiah's got officers show up to issue a citation, does that shut it down when the citation is written? Are they turned off at that point? Or can they just continue blasting? And is there a way to say if a citation is written, the permit is automatically withdrawn and you got to shut it down? If you have the problem of the officers show up, okay, we'll turn it down. The officer drives away and it goes right back up again. Does that do anything to a permit that's already been issued? That, we're playing a
Rhetorical, or
game.
do you want them to answer them?
I'm just running through some questions.
Do you want them to think about that though? Does people want, that's a good question potentially,
It might be
right?
worth it for the chief to talk about how they might address that situation because we've talked about that.
Being that it's a violation, we can't physically pull the plug on an amplifier or anything else. If it rose to the level of a crime, then we're talking different things, disorderly conduct or those kind of things. We might have some other tools. This is not really that. And really what we have talked about as a department, is that, based on complaint, but if we go there and we, have enough, we issue a citation, and we leave and they say, you know what, I'm not turning it down and I'm going to take the citation. We get another complaint. We're going to go back and go through the same process. We're going to say, have they turned it down at all? Is this still unreasonable? Here's another citation, and I think that we have the ability to do that per complaint. And so eventually that, again, that's not being our goal, but eventually that's going to be pretty cost prohibitive, for them to not comply, I guess, with
$500.
form. So, yeah.
$500, and that's, what's the second one's a Class C misdemeanor?
Yeah, I think I think it is.
Okay.
Well, and there's a chronic nuisance ordinance that also we have that pertains to that too.
But I think their argument is that they have a permit to be loud.
I wonder also, as we talked about this, but I wonder if maybe there could be some language in a permit, like, I am hesitant with decibel limits, as a blanket statement, but I'll say something not to exceed a certain amount, because you could have a permit and what we talked about earlier, but if there is an enforcement action that we could take, theoretically somebody could pull in a jet engine and turn that puppy on and just say, I got a permit, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't think that that's going to happen, but I just think that maybe if you had something that was not to exceed a certain amount, that might give us something a little bit easier to enforce, at the venue where it's at. Distances I am hesitant with, and I say that because from my house, which is on the other side of Monmouth, I can hear Western Oregon football games. The announcement. I don't think it's unreasonable, but I will tell you that there are people that we will get complaints on various types of things, and I think that as soon as you set a foot distance, you kind of tie your hands on enforcement, and so it is tough, but all the things that we talk about, at the end of the day, some of it comes back to what's reasonable.
John, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You had a few more things.
And John, you raised the specter of somebody getting a bunch of permits they had no intention of using to block out another business from getting any permits. A clause that says use them or lose them might take care of that. And if you have issued X number of permits that were not accompanied by an event, they're all gone.
Or we do the max limit, right, which is.
Yeah, and that's the
they're
other
only
point.
Good permits are only good for 3 months.
Right.
Only get 3 months at a time or 2 months at a time. And
Right. And that
Except
brings
for
me
Chris.
around to, I wonder about a limit on the number of permits per property in a calendar year.
But you've got a business.
Yeah.
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 That's what they do.
Yeah, if they're trying to book bands, they have to know.
Ugh.
I don't see any great appetite for that number of events or.
I see this, I'm speaking to that from the neighbor's perspective. Every weekend
In an appetite.
for months. I know. I'm just saying where that came from. See,
And again.
I'm worried
if
about the
it's
neighbors.
Excessive and.
Right.
Even a reasonable person says that's just way out of line, even with your permit, then we can take action. We've already said that. Chris.
So looking at number 2 on page 20, if neighbors did respond within the given time to Marty, so what would happen if neighbors said, we don't want to do this? Do you look for a threshold of 3 neighbors, 4 neighbors? How would you judge in giving out that permit how people are complaining prior to the event?
I suspect that similar to the chief's response to the level of complaint, that I would take into consideration that as it related to imposing conditions on the permit and probably not, I wouldn't jump to a point where the permit wouldn't be issued. Or I would have a conversation with the applicant and say, here are the concerns that have been raised. And so based on that, the permit would be issued with certain conditions.
And so I'm wondering if number 2 can be kind of worded after the fact of if there are complaints made, and we will consider those complaints, and the permit could be revoked. So you'd use the same kind of review process that you have for number 2 in the middle of the permit where people are too loud, and because because I heard from people that were blocks away from downtown who were saying, I have my windows closed in the summer. I don't have air conditioning and I have my windows closed because it's so loud, and it's still loud through my window.
Right.
So those are complaints that people can make afterwards to consider whether they should be able to keep the permit.
If I can't, I wouldn't do that in 2. I made a note here, maybe in number 5, about retracting or.
Yeah,
But I will want to be careful about that, because the whole point of the permit is to allow them to exceed the limits. And again, a business that has contracts with bands, they have to know that they've got a measure of protection there within which they've been allowed. And the limits are going to be those conditions imposed by the permit. I don't think you can have somebody operating within the permit and then we decide after the fact that, no, that really is too loud, we're taking your permit away, when they
Yeah.
haven't violated any of the provisions of the permit.
It's pretty simple. Turn your music down.
I'm not sure that's.
Maybe. Depends on the.
I mean, no, you get the permit for excessive loud noise. And if you cannot conduct your noise such that it's not making your neighbors miserable, then you are not an adult who's figured out how to work well with others, and you either lose your band or you turn your noise down.
Chris, and then John.
Yeah, thank you. And clearly we're all a little fired up about this. I'd like to address something that Lane had said. The permits are to allow businesses to exceed those limits, and I would suggest that I would be interested in an ordinance that allows businesses to exceed the established limits there that we've discussed ad nauseum responsibly. And I know that this is a judgment call, but this is rife with judgment calls,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, if we take it from that angle, because we want businesses to be able to, you know, continue to engage and do their business, right? We want 6-year-olds to be able to go to sleep, you know, before 10 p.m., right? Heck, I know that my mom had me in bed way before that when I was 6, and we want people to be able to exist together in a space where we can have a concert event and a cultural event, and that neither is, you know, the winner or exclusive to the other. And so, you know, it seems like you have a suggestion.
Well, yeah, I think responsibly is probably a constitutionally void for vagueness standard.
Okay.
You're right. You're kind of pushing the limits in life, but this is all fairly accepted and historical language about comfort, repose, health, peace, safety, but responsibly.
Well,
I'm not sure how. I'm going to say I think that would be a constitutionally void standard.
and I'm not suggesting that we add that to this. I'm just suggesting that's what's prompting,
Put it in
right?
a permit.
And so I'd like to do a quick test on how my understanding is that this could work. So I'm a business, and I have a series of events that's going to go, you know, 4 weeks, concurring Fridays, and I apply for 4 events. I apply for the series, but I pay 4 fees, right, under what we've described. And the first event comes, and, you know, I've got things turned up, and I've got things turned up really, really loud. And maybe there's specifics written into that permit, maybe there's not, but it's so loud that it's generating community complaints. It's generating, you know, a lot of distress, right? The police department comes and says, "Hi, we understand you have a permit, but it's excessively loud." Even within the scope of that permit, is that how some way that conversation would go, right? Or how would that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would in my mind, and I understand that there's probably some issues currently with that, and especially if
Yeah.
we took enforcement action and went to court because like, hey, I got this permit that says I can exceed. I mean, that's going to be a separate thing, but I think that there has to be some limit to that, and I think that that's the officer's judgment on the scene is like, hey, it's 10 o'clock at night, and this is like, I mean, I can't hear anything. I mean, I'm going, you know,
Yeah.
There's got to be some standard, but I think that to answer your question, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how the conversation would go.
I love that. So the police come and they say, "Hey, you know, you have this permit and it's excessively loud. Can you turn it down?" And I'm belligerent and I say, "You know, go pound dirt. I've got a permit." Then the police would potentially say, "Well, you know, you're at risk of having us revoke your permit or not issue or not us, but you're at risk of the city revoking your permit or not issuing future permits." And that's the control that I'm seeing. That's the level of check and balances, is that future permit or you know, not issuing or revoking those future permits, right? Is that something that we could do?
Yeah, I'll have to think about that. What that standard would be because I've already got a permit to exceed.
Yeah.
Was it double what's reasonable? I don't know how you create another standard above that says that's too much, unless the city manager, I think the clearest is that you build in a decibel limit.
Yeah.
That's clear. That's black and white. And if you want to have that kind of control, that's probably the best way to do it.
Well, if we write that, you know, the city may modify, waive, or revoke permits, you know, and then under what grounds would the city? Under what grounds could the city decide not to issue a permit, right? Let's say that we're day 50 into my forever unbirthday party,
You're not gonna do
right?
that.
Well, I know, but I'm dreaming. You know, under what grounds would the city not issue a permit? I'd be interested in seeing that level of check and balance somewhere in here, the revocation of future permit or the city not issuing a permit, having some level of judgment, right? And so we're placing judgment with, and I'm using all the wrong words. I'm not a lawyer, but we're placing a level of trust and judgment in our police department, which I support. We're placing a level of trust and judgment within our city manager and or her designee at the time of issuing the permit, which I support. I'd love to see some measure of trust and judgment and check and balance regarding a decision to not issue or revoke. a permit.
If I can, let me just try this then and take out the permit process. Everybody just has to follow the standard. I mean, this is a conversation about creating a permit that allows you to do so much, but we really don't want you to do too much more than so
Well-
much. So you could just avoid this whole conversation by taking out the permit process entirely.
And then if we did that, no amplified music would be allowed. We were footloose.
Sure,
Right.
but you would
Sure.
follow under this general standard of
Loud.
loud, raucous, disturbing, and nobody would be allowed to exceed that.
So I understand, my reading is that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, that isn't that far different than what we've got now, but maybe it is? Is that enough? No?
It would be very similar.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we have now. And so what we have now isn't working.
Well,
Well,
I'd suggest it. I'm saying it's
This
not
is,
working.
this is a little bit, I would say clearer, a little bit clearer language.
Okay.
Um, You're not going to get something that you know is going to work. And also keep in mind, it's hard to craft one of these for the bad guys because whatever you end up is also going to be applicable to the good guys. Yeah.
And that's in my next comment.
Yeah.
But I would love to see a way for the city to revoke future permits, with cause, or to not issue a permit based on excessive past complaints.
Yeah, you know, because all this is doing is it's allowing somebody who plays music too loud to say, I now have a permit to play music too loud.
And I
And when
love-
neighbors
Conditions
complain,
Yeah.
That you didn't have before.
Yeah.
Potentially in excess of what the rules are.
Yeah.
So Marty can place conditions on that,
as,
which right now wouldn't necessarily be able to.
but
Mhm.
decibels would still be too loud because they're decibels that are excessive.
That would be a clearer standard.
Then why don't we have the decibels just in there?
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
To-
I guess I'm
the chief.
hearing, yeah, I guess I'm hearing, and maybe I'm mistaken, but you're looking for something measurable that you can use, that you can enforce, that's a little bit more clear, and is hopefully going to save you time in the future from having to continue to do this type of enforcement. So, and maybe I'm misinterpreting your words, but I guess I want, like, are we giving you measurable things to work with? Because your organization is going to be the one that has to enforce this. When I'm working, I'd like to know. I'd rather know than not know. Just tell me. And so I guess I'm wondering if this is helpful, I think, and measurable to help you enforce.
I think it is, but I guess where I go with this is that you could poll 100 people and get 100 different responses. And I think that
Mhm.
even if
Mhm.
what's reasonable to me may not be reasonable
Reasonable
to
to
somebody
somebody
else.
else.
And I think that when we can add some clarity, which I think that we've done,
In there, yeah.
many people maybe won't agree with this, but I think that it does provide some clarity for us as the enforcers, you know, and I think that you all bring up very good points, and they're all many of which we did discuss
Yeah, you guys are probably out.
already. And so, yes.
And they've talked to their counterparts in
Yes,
other cities.
in other
that
cities,
have
yeah.
Similar.
Similar
ordinance.
issues. So I guess I would be in favor of at least having a maximum decibels that you cannot exceed. Something that's a little more measurable
And then she couldn't give them permission to exceed.
to exceed
maximum
that.
Level. Sure.
Something that's a little bit more measurable. That we'd be able to say, because then I don't know if that would minimize the arguments or the, you can't shut me off. And it's more like, yes, I can because you're exceeding.
John and then. Mike.
Yes, John.
Two things, and I'll try to be quick about it, and I don't need it, Roxanne. you know, you normally jab me at that point when I say I'm going to try to be quick. I'm used to it. It might be that, to your point, if you said not to exceed this decibel level, not, and then so your officer, or you could go up and say, you know, man, I distract you guys and you're over the decibel limit. I'll come back in a half an hour or 15 minutes. And if you're still over, I'm going to ding you. If not, you know, and if you're into that acceptable zone, then you're good. That's community policing. That's getting it done. But you've got a little bit, should you need it, you've given them fair notice on that. Now, the other thing, and to your point, Councilor Lopez, relative to revocation, you know, if you look at number 6, here, the applicant or any person who submits comment can submit, they can appeal the decision in either direction. So if it's granted, that can be appealed. If it's denied, that can be appealed. And it comes to council. And so if there is a revocation, rather than leaving that with the city manager, I would prefer that responsibility for that be broadened out a bit and be referred to the council on a revocation piece. I mean, it'd be similar to an appeal, but that way, you know, there could be a discussion about that. Varied opinions. So that's it.
Yeah.
Lane?
Yeah, just a couple of things. On the decibel, we can look at that. If we're going to make that a standard part of the code, then we'd have to look at decibels at various distances, I think, from the
Right.
sound source. So that gets a little bit more complicated than it sounds, I think. But we can look and see. I think some cities have addressed it in terms of decibels. The model code does not. In terms of the revocation and let's say an appeal to the council, I'd have to figure that out because let's say if you've got somebody who has a series of events, and we're going to revoke that, is there time for the council to conduct an appeal hearing before the next 1 or 2 or 3 events are supposed to take place? So that becomes an issue of timing and logistics.
We've got more time on the front end.
Yeah, more time on the front end.
Yeah,
That's right.
But not time on the back.
right,
end.
right.
That's my concern.
Sure.
I don't love the decibel limit for the reasons that the chief had detailed. You know, different conditions and ways that the noise bounce. And heck, I know that on some nights in my bedroom I can hear the train in Independence. So I don't love that. But you know, I might be able to be convinced. I do share Lane's concerns about the time and the appeal. I do think that we need some level of check and balance. The hope is that we don't use it, but some level of ability to revoke or deny with cause. That's the only thing that would give any of this teeth. And then I would love to, although this likely is under a different time frame, but or a different resolution rather. I'd love to find a way to waive waive permitting fees for nonprofit events or for educational events, and they'd still have to go through the process, but be able to waive the fee.
You could do that in the fee resolution.
Great. All right. I thought so. Thank you.
Carol,
Well,
why
we
not-
haven't set them.
I just
We
have
don't know if the fees are
like
low.
30
They could
seconds.
be
Yeah, go
$18.
ahead.
They could be $20.
I'll let Carol go ahead, and then I'm going to try and make sure we've got the next steps in mind.
I think the difference between a football game where you hear the announcer occasionally and a train that you hear for like 3 beeps and it's gone is item D on page 14. It's the duration of the sound.
Yeah.
Music sets last, 30 minutes?
Mhm.
So that's 30 minutes of constant high noise. And so that's where the rub is. I think if you heard a train for 30 minutes, we'd probably have train complaints.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
All right. So I'm going to ask again. Decibels. People want to see some options on decibel limits? Thumbs up or down? Hey,
Have to
3
vote.
up, one down and 2.
Okay.
They don't care. So let's just see some options.
I guess I'm actually like concerned with the chief's comment, but on the other side is
We're
like,
just looking
well,
at options.
And we're just
Yep,
looking at
looking
options.
at options.
May or may not even go there.
Let's look
Sure.
And
One-
Lane,
the one
thank you
thing I
for
think-
remembering that sound intensity drops with the square of the distance.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
you
And we
know,
may find
I
that it's
said,
complicated. We don't know.
I was kidding earlier at some level when I said downwind, but there's something to be said for that unless you're going to measure right at the property line or something like that,
Okay, John.
because wind direction comes into play.
Well, and that's actually kind of what I was going to speak to. I think that if you were going to do decibel limits, I think that, it would be from the source, in my opinion, where those, could or should be taken. And I do think that decibel limits are different than, where you can hear something from, to Carol's point, and so I think that gets away from the distance and it's strictly just decibel limits from the source.
So you're saying stand right in front of the stage and see what it says?
Yeah, from the venue. I mean, maybe it's not right in front of the speaker, but it's right there, at
On the
the-
In the venue, right. Okay.
I would.
That would
Yeah,
work
that
for
would
me.
make, that makes
reasonable.
sense. That seems reasonable. Yes. Mhm.
We'll take a look.
Okay. And revocation and things like that. I mean, you guys can talk that through a little
Yeah.
bit.
Can I ask especially if we do decibels, do we also have permits? Is there hydraulics there between these?
Well,
If you have
Yes.
decibels, you don't
I mean,
want to
you
exceed
don't-
the decibels.
that's
yeah.
true. When they may
I
not
think
take the
if you
permit.
say you can have a permit and you can't be too raucous and here's your decibel limit. You can be
Mhm.
pretty darn raucous. If you go past this, we have a problem.
Do you want to have a decibel level in the code and then a provision that would allow the city manager to allow a
Not
higher
beyond.
level of decibels?
No, I say they work together, Lane.
The
The
decibel,
permit is to say to the noise source, you need to check with your neighbors. Here's the conditions under which you can be noisy, one of which is not to exceed X decibels. Okay?
Oh.
And it's to put that stuff in front of the noise source and say, these are the conditions that we're going to allow you to be pretty darn noisy.
Oh, okay, well, but that's not quite what I heard. I thought from the,
I think that's where we want to go. Is the decibel limit would just be fixed and people could not.
in the
hit-
code,
In the code.
and not as part of the permit. It would
So
be in
people
the
would not-
code.
right.
Yeah,
So
right.
then the permit process allows time, place, manner, but not level of raucosity. Raucousness.
And I would say, I mean, one other purpose
Set
that
it
the
up.
permit process was
Thanks.
serving as we brought it forward was not perfectly, but an attempt to try to resolve conflicting
Some of the conflict
events.
That's true. Okay.
Right.
And
We'll
then
work on it.
So it still has merit,
Yeah.
but we're not allowing unlimited raucousness by the permit.
So you bring up a good point, though, as to the need for the permit is
Yeah.
the two events. So,
The conflict, yeah.
Especially city
General rules,
events
yeah.
versus,
yeah.
Mhm.
okay. Did we leave other unresolved?
sounds like we have a drawing board to go back
Yeah.
to, that we will take all your comments into consideration.
Appeals process.
And we'll send you a bottle of aspirin as well.
So appeals process, I agree, right? So they, revoke and they say, well, we want to appeal to the council. We have another concert Friday night. So, well, the council's not meeting until 2 weeks from,
Right.
then what? Well, for one thing, a revocation on their record, even if it happens after a couple of more violations, would be a revocation then, and we back up the revocation, meaning that's going to make it hard for them to get one
Yeah.
next year,
Right.
even if they had 2 bad events. It also might be an incentive for them to calm down the next 2 events before they come to us and go, see, don't revoke us. We'll
Right.
play nice now. And we could say, okay, but stay nice. Or,
Right. Yeah, because my thought was,
So I think that coming to us does give either more weight or more.
my notion was to
It's
give it to the
not-
city manager first and then have
That's
a,
what-
and there's any number of places in the code, I think, where we have exactly that process.
Yeah.
That if you don't, you appeal the decision to the manager, and if you don't like what she says, then you can talk to council.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you for your comments.
we're moving on this.
We'll keep
now,
working on this
so
and bring it
if-
back to you.
if
Thank
you-
you, Marty.
Thank you. Hey,
you.
staff, thanks for the hard work. We're, yeah, good work.
I'm glad Wayne loves this stuff.
It's fun.
We're running a little bit behind and I would normally take a break around now. Do we need 2 minutes? Yes, we need 2 minutes. Sorry. Put away your city hall report, lady. Okay. We'll 8:22, I'll make it 8:26. Yep.
Lady with the
cultural
hand
norms
is
within an
busy again.
organization.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you to our reporter for sticking.
Yeah.
Well, he understands how hard we work.
I made a comment about the sausage making of government.
Huh?
Yeah.
Turns out he has experience as butcher, so this.
Oh.
All right, our next and last item of work business is a city hall update. There's concrete over there.
There is
Yes.
concrete over there, and I was
There's a
just telling
problem.
Councillor Oberst, who was sharing with me some of the vagaries of construction in Toronto,
Toronto area, yeah.
that our concrete has been curing since Valentine's Day, and we had cross-laminated timber members and the wood delivered today, and the hope is that the first tilt up of those that cross-laminated timber structure will go up tomorrow. Fingers crossed. So you'll start seeing things above the ground where we've been doing a bunch of work up until this point to get that building going below the ground. So, and I'm going to double check with our city recorder to see. I have a presentation that was also included in your packet that I was going to speak to, rather than just the staff report. Do I have presentation? I do not have permission to share yet.
Well, who do you get it from?
I just made you a presenter,
Now,
Marty. I just
Permission.
made you a presenter.
You have it now, Barney.
Ugh.
Thanks. Showing and
yeah, you should
presentation.
be able to run it.
Great. Well, council, it's been, the last time I was able to give you an update about the City Hall project was before the demolition, which was last August. And so I think it's probably time that I give you a little bit more detail or give you a chance to ask questions about the project, and I can work with our project team to bring them back if there's anything you're curious about our new City Hall. My purpose for bringing you an update is really just to talk about the current status of the project. Most of all, I want to inform you about where we are with the project budget, which our City Hall key communicators have been learning about. I've been presenting to community members, and so I didn't want to get that information out ahead of your knowledge of it. So I'm also going to say that because I've been presenting about this project with our there it goes. It's advancing slowly. With some of our community partners, there's some stuff in here that's history that you have already lived through. So most of you know about our reasons for needing to replace the City Hall and the story that brought us here. At the time that we demolished City Hall, it was 92 years old and it had lots of needs. And this is just a friendly reminder in case you were missing the old building, the flooded basement, and
That's such a nice term.
Man.
Needs.
we had, so yes, you know all about the condition of the prior building and our reason for proposing a replacement. These are all photographs of our former building. Also, most of you were part of the decision-making that led us up to why we would be replacing on the current site with a single facility. We went through a process with FFA, our architecture firm, and they've been with us since 2018 to help us figure out what the options were to replace the building. Oh, I know why I had this slide up here. I always like to remind us what we're going for. So of course, a safer building, a more accessible building. I think the community told us in 2020, which everybody knows was a terrible time to be out trying to talk to the community about anything because we were all having a pandemic. What the community told us when we were replacing the building is we're looking for a building that's right-sized for our community, that it's not costly, that but something that can be an asset to the downtown and spur activity and an asset for us. One of the two things that I tell people about what this building is going to be that is in marked contrast to what it was before is, first of all, that the sustainability of the structure made of cross-laminated timber is really it's really going to make it it's a sustainable product that it's going to make for a beautiful building that's also will last for a long time. And then also we're going to have public spaces. The plaza, our meeting rooms, the council chambers and courtroom will be open for people to use. And so I'm excited about being able to welcome the community into the building. I'm going to skip through some of these slides fairly quickly because I think you know what we're building. We've got the council chambers and court one-story facility, which is on the east side of the site. And you can see that taking shape when you go and look at the foundation now that it's been poured. I'm also very excited to go look at the foundation because you can see the elevator shaft for the two-story building, and there is going to be a, the corridor that connects the two buildings. And please stop me at any time if there's some curiosity that you've got about what's going on. I've talked about all of that. I'm going to talk a little bit about value engineering on a future slide, and I just want you to know that the current plan for square footage for the building is it's just shy of 13,000 square feet. Whoops. And the other thing I'm going to start with is talking a little bit about the schedule. And I know that everyone's been very patient and kind to not, say, why is it taking so long? Because even up through the demolition, we took a couple of pauses on the project, and I think we did it for good reason. But where we are right now today with our estimated schedule is, as I mentioned, we demolished the building last August. And since then, we have been, and up to that time, we had been doing value engineering work all with the aim of trying to keep the building that we build within our available funding. So from this point forward, there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we're not seeing, and not just the below the ground part about the foundation, but Swinnerton Builders, our general contractor, has all of their subcontractors under contract as of October. They've been generating shop drawings for every element of the building. You've seen some of the site work with the utilities being in place and pouring the foundation, but off at the Timber Lab site, the cross-laminated timber fabrication has been taking place, and they're preparing the more detailed shop drawings to be able to actually construct the building once you start to see the structure go up. So you're seeing the complete top of slab, which is so the concrete was poured on Valentine's Day. And so all of the underground foundation, utilities, radon mitigation is done. And we're waiting our building permit, the full building permit, and the comments from our building official, which is later than we had planned. But they've given us the go-ahead to begin to start to put up the structure. And Swinnerton estimates that I'm on the second or the right side column over here. Swinnerton estimates that we're going to be able to be at the top of the roof and having the roof installed on the building within a few months from now. And their hope is that maybe we can have a community event or do something to celebrate that the structure's in place. So yeah, once I have a date for that, I will make sure to let you know. The idea, I'm sorry?
Just have a music event on the roof.
Gonna need a
I'm gonna check on that. Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna need a permit.
City
but-
sponsored.
City
All
sponsored.
right.
I forgot to ask you about that provision, but I'll do that at a future date. The idea is also that a bunch of the interior work will happen once we've got the structure in place and the envelope is complete, and that'll happen throughout the summer. Beginning in about September, things like the parking lot, the plaza, the things on the outside of the building and the site will be completed, and the hoped for ribbon cutting and opening of the building at this point will be in October of this year. That's where we are. That's where we think we are at this point. And there are always things that have interrupted the schedule, like getting the subcontractors under contract, permit issuance. Some of the lead time of the materials has delayed things, but this is where we think we're sitting with the schedule now. So I wanted to pause and talk a little bit about the budget, and I see that my numbers are all a little bit out of whack because of the formatting. Sorry about that. So everybody, I think the way we've been talking about this project throughout is that it's a project that we've assembled $9 million to build. And that came from three sources. We had prior property sale that we reserved funds from. Thankfully, our voters said yes to a voter-approved bond, and we're devoting some of a good share of our urban renewal funding to assemble that funding. where we're sitting this month and forecasting it, and we're at 10% of completion of construction, is that we've got a direct cost of construction budget, and I'm sorry, that's direct and indirect costs of construction with Swinnerton of 8.04 million. The professional services is a whole complement of different services, including our architects and engineering, the project manager from OTAC that we've hired as a city to act as our owner's representative. And the city is also bearing the cost of special inspections, such as the concrete curing, and there were some other hazardous mitigation costs that we are bearing. And so I would say those professional services costs were more than we were originally estimating. And those owner costs include, the owner cost line item includes things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment, technology, audio-visual equipment. I'm going to say right now that I don't believe that we have, even at $540,000, it's going to be very difficult to outfit the building in full with that line item. So, and we have a pretty small contingency of $100,000 that the owner's rep and I are guarding fiercely, and it's not very much money. But what it's doing is driving the total cost of the project beyond what our available funding is. So this is one of the reasons that I wanted to give you a briefing, is that as we're tracking the budget, and we're doing that as carefully, when I say we, I'm talking about Randy Isaac, who is our OTAC project manager, and I are carefully tracking this budget. That construction amount is a not to exceed, I call it a not to exceed amount, but it's the guaranteed maximum price that we negotiated with our builder. And so barring some very major change or set of change orders, I'm expecting for that line item to stay relatively stable. So wanted to just give you a preview of where we're tracking with the budget. And if you look at that and you say, well, why are we over what we estimated? I have a couple of thoughts about that. I think that even coming into setting a price tag for the building of $9 million, we had not taken into account the design costs that we had incurred up to that point. Our construction costs and our construction cost inflation is running ahead of where it was. And so when FFA came to us in prior presentations and said, we think the building's going to cost this much, we were not experiencing the kind of inflation that we are now. I will also say that the design that was presented to us by our architect turns out, when it comes time to practically build the thing, it was quite complicated and also costlier than we could afford. And that's what led us into that phase of value engineering, where we said, and I'll talk about what we did there in just a minute, but there are things like there's a lot of glass on the first floor wrapped with a lot of brick, and that's actually not fundamentally, that's not a structure. And so our design included basically a structure within a structure. And so one of the biggest things that we did was try to fix that, to both bring down the cost, but also to just to make it more practical to build. And I don't build buildings, so I'm repeating something that our owner's rep and our designer and our builder have been in consultation about for about 6 months. And I think that value engineering effort, it helped rationalize the design, and it also made it an easier building to build, something I've already said. I shared with you the monthly report that OTAC is now producing for the community. And one of the things that Randy Isaac, our project manager, and I talk about is, and we put as a section in that monthly report, is that I'll be coming to you at some point when this project costs more than what we originally budgeted, and propose sources from which we could find the funds to be able to afford the final building costs. And those potentially could be American Rescue Plan funding. It could include general fund funding. Our finance director reminded me that it's possible that the utility funds could potentially help contribute toward that. I've made a state grant request to assist with some of the site improvements. So I'll have a clear answer for you and options for that in the future. But at the moment, I wanted you to know what was happening with the project budget. Okay. And what did we do when we were working on value engineering? I mentioned that the reason to do it was to try to manage to the budget that was available. In redesigning the building, we did reduce the square footage of the building by about 2,000 square feet, mostly by taking square footage off of the office portion. And we made the court section of the building, which wraps around the council chambers, also a little bit smaller. Reduce the amount of storage and offices in the corridor. The other thing we did was that it was looking like our systems, our HVAC, our heating, ventilation, air conditioning, our mechanical, plumbing. There were a lot of those things had both long lead times and were what was specified by the architect was expensive. And so we've been going through everything from the lighting packages to the plumbing fixtures to find lower cost alternatives that still function well in the building. And I think long lead time, our electrical switchgear, I heard from a couple of our key communicators that who do construction work, they're experiencing many of the same things we are on the City Hall project, that electrical switchgear, brick, there are some things that have 6 and 9 and 12-month lead times. And so as soon as we got Swinnerton Builders aboard, they told, our elevator is another example, getting that stuff ordered and getting a firm cost on it has been a lot of what we've been doing as a project team. And we're going to keep doing that throughout construction. I've appreciated working with Swinnerton because they are bringing us practical on the field options to find least cost alternatives. So a lot of what you're seeing on this slide, I have already said because it's my reason for wanting to brief you tonight about City Hall project. We think some of the uncertainty about getting equipment is easing. That's good. That's a good thing. Obviously, the project is taking longer than we planned for, but I'll keep you posted about how the schedule shapes up. We are awaiting our building permit from our building official. It's sort of an ironic thing, right, that we get permits from ourselves, but we've got kind of a firewall going so that the building official and the Independence building official is our plan reviewer. So we've got a Monmouth Independence team who's doing the building work on this building. But they are also each one-person offices. And so their ability, we have, you may know this already, but we've got multiple development projects in permit that include like the Ron Wilson Center, and we've got the Western Oregon University permits coming in the door next. So major commercial projects underway. Those folks are at capacity. And so our project is in line with everybody else's to get their permits.
And I think some of you remember our prior building official was also an electrical inspector. And everybody else relies on the county to have an electrical inspector. And the county announced at our last bulk breakfast that their electrical inspector was leaving. And they would be relying on the state,
right,
to.
Thanks.
So.
Right. And so the specialty inspections is also a point of potential timing bottleneck, but we're working through that the best way we can. Yes. And so I'm trying to be respectful from a staff perspective. I'm trying to be respectful of the workload of our building official. At the same time, I'm calling him up and I'm saying, where's our building permit? So that's, and so that's been, we've got some regular coordination and information meetings going between our project team and the building official. So I'm going to call that doing the best we can.
Let's not red tag ourselves. Huh?
Right. I actually, that's the first question I ask the building official before I start badgering him about where our building permit is you're not going to come and stop work on our project, are you? I'm kidding. But there is a little bit of a dynamic there where we're trying, they're working as fast as they can to make sure that we've got permits. We are working as fast as we can to meet a schedule this year and open our building in October. I've mentioned I really appreciate the advice of the key communicators when we meet. They have offered really good advice and made suggestions about communication. And I will say that I'm the primary bottleneck when it comes to communication, because it's up to me to make sure the website is up to date and the on-site signage is there. And I've been falling behind on that. But we have regular I mentioned the monthly progress report that you saw a copy of. That's a new thing that OTAC is producing for us so that we've got their perspective on overall how the project is going. We try to put a blurb into the monthly newsletter going out to the community and the utility bills. We've got a web page that's got the camera that looks at the site so you can see what's going on, and we'll do a time lapse of the project pretty soon once there's actually something coming up out of the ground. And then we are grateful for having Sabra aboard and working on our social media and media relations, because I think we're doing a better job of just getting news out about what's happening with the building. But if you see anything or hear anything about questions about the project, I hope you'll send them my way. I'm really interested in making sure that if people either don't know or have misperceptions or misunderstandings about what's going on with the project, I'd like to fix that. And let's see, here are some pictures. Let's see if these are the pictures before the concrete slab was poured. So those are all the concrete footings, and you can see the elevator shaft is that bottom left square, and you can see a bunch of the utilities that they're running. And this is going to be it's now inside the concrete slab. And we got some really fun pictures on Valentine's Day. It was a snow day, and we poured the concrete. And so these are pictures of the concrete being poured. And that the final coverage the starting point is on the left-hand side, and there are tarps down, and they pulled those up in order to pour. And anyway, it's been curing for all this time, and now it's all ready to build on. And I think those are my last. These are the renderings that you've seen before. So, and I won't show you these pictures unless you really want to, because you've seen them a whole bunch. But
I love them though.
Yes. And I would say one of the things from a value engineering standpoint, what I want you to know is that the full wrap of brick around the second floor, the extent of that brick it doesn't go all the way around anymore. It wraps around the front and it wraps around the back. And then there are metal panels that are in the middle. So that'll be visually, that's one of the main things you'll see that's a different look, but the shape of the building and the shape of the windows and everything else that you're seeing here is the same. The other pictures that we have, or the renderings that we have, is the south entry. A couple of things that we did at the south entry through value engineering is that the concrete sort of barrier that is in front of the break room, our electrical switchgear had to actually go somewhere. And so we're doing some things with the landscaping to be able to, the switchgear will go, if you know where the former utility box was, where you would drop off your bill, it's going to be on the alley side over there. And we're trying to open up that space where that concrete wall is along the south entry. And the vestibule where you enter in the south entry, and that, blanking on the word for it, the awning. Thank you very much. We're talking about installing the solar panel array on top of that awning instead of in the parking lot or the roof. Originally, our architect proposed putting it in the parking lot, and that makes sense. So that's what is happening with City Hall. And this is the central corridor that connects the two buildings with the council chambers and the court off to the right-hand side of this slide, and the stairs going up to the second floor on the left-hand side. And I think the last picture is a view of the council chambers. And I think we've done 3 or 4 designs of the dais, because it needs to function for both municipal court and for council and for planning commission. And there are people working at it. And so we're going to be using Oregon Correction Enterprises for that casework, which is great. And we're trying to figure out how to get all the functionality we need in the dais. And cameras and displays and some other things that our architects are very protective of, the cross-laminated timber beams that you see here, and making sure that we don't muddy them up by sticking cameras on them or doing something else. Yes. So that's what's going on I think my next slide is about the trolley. So I think that means it's time for me to stop talking. Yep.
Yay.
If you have questions, please ask. Yeah.
Will there be a time capsule in it?
We don't have one planned.
That's when I'm talking about art and extras. We need to find folks
Yep.
to do that because that's not something we have time.
Well, I should say it this way. We didn't budget for one and we hadn't planned for one. It doesn't mean that we couldn't still plan
Put one
for one.
together.
Yeah, if that was, I haven't heard that that's something that folks value and want to put together, but we can certainly do that.
We have a time capsule from the eclipse.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. In the very, very original conversation way back when we had talked about it. So
well, I'd love to.
I
have
would love to
somebody-
put some energy behind that. So we'll talk.
Okay, thanks.
Speaking of, thank you. Speaking of funding, looks like we have a little bit of a gap there, and I know that you had a couple funding source proposals, etc. I remember who. I think at our goal setting, it said something about buying bricks. Is that still on the table?
The suggestion that the key communicators also came up with, I think that, I'll say it in the abstract, I think a community fundraiser of some kind or crowdsourcing or however you want to, term it, is a viable option. Bricks in the plaza are not part of the design there, but that doesn't, and I say that because I have heard from both our building team and from our city staff team that they're difficult to maintain.
Gotcha.
Go look
I-
in front of Central High School. They're very difficult to maintain. They
Fair
chip
enough.
And break and
And I recognize that doesn't craft that gap, but I have trouble believing that entire gap's going to be taken up by just one source. So
nope, there's
thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the chance to keep you posted about what's going on with the project. Please ask me anything if you hear things or you're curious. And that's all I've got on that report tonight.
Mayor's report, and I'll keep it brief because you've all been at all my stuff, I think, this last few weeks. I want to thank everyone, especially our department heads who spent their whole Saturday with us just a couple of days ago, and appreciate really great work and thought and a big long list of stuff that we have to look forward to, and reminder that all of those things don't even start until July. So we'll be reviewing what came out of that as far as our goals, as far as some of the objectives that we put with those goals. I'll have an opportunity to review a draft of those in the near future. And today, a few of us were able to meet with our U.S. Congresswoman, Andrea Salinas came, just to hear about Monmouth, and really very excited to connect more with our needs and be that voice for us in the U.S. Congress. I was pleased to hear, and maybe I can hear John or Chris or Carol, she feels very good about the opportunity for bipartisan work, at least on the two committees she's been assigned. So all the news, all the things we hear, all the things we see are people profit in ways both monetary and non-monetary from making it be all about the division and all about the drama. And nice to hear a freshman congresswoman, although she has a lot of experience on the Hill, she's worked on the Hill, so she knows how to get some things done. And her goal is to get them done for Oregon and for her district and for us. John or Carol, Chris, any other comments about that?
I think the committees she's on are appropriate ones and are good ones. I think she had a pretty good sense of how to deliver and help deliver on some of the major funding bills that have come forward, infrastructure and inflation reduction, and the more recent ones on how we could capitalize on that. Frankly, I was glad to see her. We didn't really see her in the campaign season. She's one of those that's a Lake Oswego person trying to represent rural Polk County. And I think she's got a genuine interest and ability to do that. So I agree with you. I think she knows how to do things. I do think that it'll be important that when she comes again, that make sure we have a good engaged turnout. So she can understand that we're serious and deserve as much consideration as the northern part of her district.
We had a town hall this evening in Monmouth only. It wasn't advertised, I don't even think, to independents folks, but it appeared to be mostly sort of by invitation. And I'm not sure where she got her mailing list, but there wasn't a lot of general publicity, but I know folks who were going to attend. So hopefully she got a good
Good.
turnout. Oh, good.
Oh,
Good.
wonderful.
Thank you. Any other?
Just building on what Councillor Carey stated, I think she's really putting a lot of effort into being a great and active representative of rural Willamette Valley here, and it's really my hope and expectation that today's meeting will be the first of many in the future. She seems like someone who's genuinely interested in our community, and I believe that she'll represent us well.
All right. So our boards and commissions reports, and I'm just going to let you know I have my first MINAP meeting next week. So I'm super excited about that. But what have others been up to? Councillor Salinas Oliveros.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Arts and Culture, we met on the 16th this month and covered the library art show. Was very successful, about 143 entries, all ages across the board, and a lot of community engagement in voting on the artwork. And so it was a really great experience. It was a great experience for some of the youth who entered as well. And so, and the question was being asked of, what about next year? What about next year? So it was a very successful art show that happened. And we also had a Google training by some of our members. We are learning I work with Google a lot, but we were learning to share folders and information within our committee. So that was fun. I think there were a lot of side fun conversations, so not quite sure how much we got done, but it was a very fun training. And then we talked about other events coming up, starting to plan for 4th of July, trying to, Suzanne Farley made a really nice project list per month of what's coming up and who needs to do what and how we need to communicate with our schools and different things. So that was really nice. And then we talked about a possible logo, but we'll see where that goes in the future. So good meeting. Thank you.
Go ahead. Councillor Lopez and Councillor Obers.
Yes. My report tonight, and I'll attempt to be brief, as you've already heard my voice quite a bit, is on the Homeless Alliance. As I'm sure many of you are aware, our new governor released Executive Order 2302 relating to declaring a state of emergency regarding the homelessness crisis in our state. Within this order, she detailed a plan to distribute funding to communities throughout the state that had experienced an increase in homelessness over time. And our area, which is based on our COC, they broke the areas up by COC, is one of those areas that is receiving funding. I highlight this for a couple points. The remainder of state COC that we used to be part of did not receive funding. which I'm hopeful that there will be some revised, some revisions there, and they'll be supported. However, this underlines the wisdom in us in Marion County moving forward with creation of our own COC, and it illustrates how truly impactful this is. Right now, we're slated to receive between 13.5 million on the low end and 15 million on the high end in funding, and they're still crafting the specifics around how that will be distributed, the kinds of projects. Essentially, though, in terms of housing and homelessness, right now the direction is that most of that is to go toward directly toward housing the currently unhoused. And it's a rapidly developing landscape. I think we're learning more and more every week or two to respond to this. And within the scope of that executive order, there's been created a MAC group. I don't know. I was looking for the acronym, and I'm sorry I did not write it down. We'll come back to that next, but essentially that group is the group that will liaise with the state and how to move forward on this. Large takeaway is that really short time frames for a lot of these things, and a lot that's still uncertain and being formed. As soon as I know, you'll know. But some real important work going on between our COC and the state right now in terms of bringing those funds locally. I think that within the executive order, many of the current stipulations are that these projects have to really be executed very, very quickly. We're talking in terms of a year. There's still an ongoing dialogue that we want, where we're asking for reasonable expectations and timeframes, but the states put a pretty tight clock on this, and so it's been quite a scramble. But very fortunately, we're part of the COC. We have an active part in it, and where we're at the table because of the groundwork that you all supported previously. So thank you, and I'll keep you up to speed. That concludes my report.
Councillor Oberst, you had?
Quick, tree board had a meeting. We only had 2 members show up, so we had me and staff and 2 members. It was a small group, but we've got a tree planting planned. And a few years ago, a total of 6 pyramidal European hornbeams were planted at the entry to Madrona Park. There are now 2. 4 of them have died. We've got 4 on order to replace the 4 that didn't make it, and we're going to try to get those in the ground. We're also looking at possibly a dogwood or something like it for kind of understory at Gentle Woods Park. And Russ has pointed out it might be a good plan to start planting some young shade trees as understory at Gentle Woods for when the current large adult shade trees reach full maturity and fail to thrive, shall we say. So that's sort of on the future agenda. One of the things that was fun, we used to get 20 and 30 trees planted at a tree planting because we had this local resident with a tractor with an auger. And it's a whole lot easier to plant trees when all you have to do is put the dirt back in the hole. And you don't have to get it out first, right? Well, I called Brian Sparks and asked him if he might be interested in coming forward with his tractor and his auger and himself, and he said absolutely.
Oh.
So we will have at a minimum the 4 holes at Madrona Park drilled out by Brian in advance. And I left my notes at home, but I believe we settled on April 22nd, Saturday, as tree planting day, which I think is Earth Day, which is kind of appropriate. And Arbor Day is the following Friday, so we're gonna get in there ahead of that. And but that's the current plan. That's the current extent. Still looking for more members.
Yeah.
Yep.
Planning Commission had a work session with the, to discuss the code revision. And it had a number of things. They did not pass it forward at that time. They had a few things they needed clarification on and some more detail. So there's some more work to do with them. That's scheduled to come to us sometime in March. I think our third meeting in March, perhaps second meeting in March. And the next meeting for the Planning Commission will be a discussion of the housing production strategy that they've looked at once before. And so anyway, hopefully they'll get a little bit of clarity and push forward on that. And some decisions will need to be made vis-a-vis direction on how we go with that, how we'd stimulate that.
Yeah.
So good, it's good, fitting with our discussion we had over the weekend. Nice timing.
Takes us to our city managers. It's so nice not to have to look at the screen and see if any of you have your hand raised. Our city managers report.
You know, Madam Mayor, I'll just add to your comments about our goal setting over the weekend. I want to thank the council for your time. It was really useful. Our leadership team meets as it usually does at the beginning of the week of the council meeting. So this morning we did a debrief about that, about the session and about sort of, our capabilities to carry out what, the goal setting. And I've already received the draft report from Sarah Singer Wilson and her team. So the leadership team is going to turn back out to you basically a goal list and a plan with timelines and like, so that's our next step, is to give you a plan about how we plan to carry out what we did at the goal setting retreat. So I found that a really useful session. Thank you for your time. The other things that came up, I'm mentioning these things from our leadership team meeting today because I want you to know that they're coming forward. One is I wanted to thank our finance director, Janet Chenard, who attended the Western Oregon University Careers in Government. I'm calling it a fair, but it was an event. And so she did a good job highlighting opportunities for local government careers with our students. And so that was last week. We've initiated the budget process. And so also in the finance department, Janet's been getting all the departments ready to develop the budget. And we feel like we've got some good guidance from our session this weekend to help shape what we're going to be doing for that proposal. Please plan for March 13th groundbreaking for our skate park. It's going to be in the afternoon, and we'll send you details. Russ will make sure that you have details about the event. And the other thing that Russ mentioned in our goal setting is that one of the things that we're really glad about is that he's hired an engineer of record, a firm who can help us with carrying out our capital projects. So that firm is AKS Engineering. They're under contract now. So Russ is starting to assign them work, and I really feel like that's going to help us move projects forward, including things like the TSP and our master plans and designing some of the projects we have underway. The State of the City's address is coming up next week. It's the 28th at 11 a.m. at Independence Civic Center. Calling it the right building, I hope. And finally, our library director, Chris, reported in on upcoming programs for March. And all I'll say is that there's a great lineup of a whole bunch of stuff happening at the library, and they're trying to do programs for all ages, getting back into full swing with programming. So we're excited about rolling all of that out. I think that's all I've got. Yes.
And just, okay, go ahead.
Given the report on the finances of the city hall, will that impact our budgeting process in any way? In terms of like savings or, that sort of thing? Reserve?
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Potentially.
If it's needed, we would, yeah.
Yes. I mean, we would make that, I would bring forward that kind of a proposal in the budget process.
Yeah.
Phyllis notes we have a joint planning and council meeting on March 1st.
It's next Wednesday.
I don't know if I had that on my calendar.
And I think it's for the purposes of the housing production strategy. It's an initial idea generating session.
Yes. And the
Thank you.
packets should be out this week sometime, so you have them a significant amount ahead of time.
7 PM, Phyllis.
Yes, John.
Thank you.
Any other comments or announcements? Well, now that we all are getting that on our calendar, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have one last quick question.
Oh,
What, what happened to the giant beams from Volunteer Hall?
The giant beams from Volunteer Hall are being stored in the, at Public Works. And we're working together also with Oregon Correction Enterprises to have it become the counter for the break room in the staff room.
Oh.
Or a conference
Cool.
table or both. We'll
Nice. Well, that's great.
yes. we're
Okay,
excited
cool.
about it.
Thanks.
We're gonna need
Thank
to
you
bring
for
above the
indulging my
weather
question.
Build something. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, Madam Mayor. My counselor comments here. I'd just like to remind us that we do have at the head of our agenda a land recognition statement, land acknowledgement statement. And it's been a little while since we've read that. I'd love to suggest that in future meetings, perhaps at the head of this our next council planning meeting, we could read that aloud, and it would be, I think, a wonderful thing to do, and a really empowering thing, and feeding into our DEI priorities.
I did have that noted tonight, but I was late sitting. Let's definitely do that. All right. Now, anyone?
I move to adjourn.
And all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty. As we